Hello, Dr. Casanov. How are you?
Hello.
Hi, hi.
Hi.
So we don't believe in doing rehearsal sessions, so we are live with a few hundreds of our friends who are
Great.
joining. Um, we are also live streaming this on YouTube because I think we are going to run out of Zoom capacity on this webinar. Seems like it's a real popular topic, so I'm glad we're doing this session.
Absolutely.
Are you at
You're,
Academic Swiss today, or are you somewhere else?
I came home.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. Actually, your invite went into my spam. So like 3 minutes, I'm like, let me go find that.
Oh no.
Yeah, but it worked out fine.
Yeah. And Lindsay, are you at home or are you at our
I am at
relative?
home. I am in home office number two,
Oh, okay.
which is not irrelevant to our topic today, right? And just sort of the shift of working and living at home, 100%. So we have two home offices here in the suburbs, and I'm in number two.
Oh, okay.
It looks very official for a home office.
Thank you. I used to, well, I still do sometimes have folks come here for therapy. I have a separate entrance, separate bathroom, and as a parent of young children, that's worked very well in my particular life.
Of course, absolutely. I've been there
Yeah.
I've, many times.
Excellent. So we got people joining by the dozen here. We typically give people, up until 2 or 3 minutes at the top of the hour or the 30-minute mark,
Great.
and get started. Um, And we also, I think in our last few sessions, we have made them even more organic. So we'll have a conversation. People will pop up with a question, the Q&A, and we'll just try and answer a few during the session instead of waiting until the Q&A. Um, so maybe a bit more chaotic than a traditional webinar, but I find it more engaging, more interesting, and we can get to the thoughtful questions that people like to pose in these sessions. So we will do that.
So I always prefer chaos and excitement to the alternative, right, Shay?
Sorry?
You always prefer chaos and excitement to the
Correct.
alternative.
Correct.
Yeah, makes it more interesting.
I think so. And again, this format of a more organic conversation roundtable, we started this 14 months ago with this education program. And from the beginning, that was the idea. We never wanted to do 45 minutes. Here's a bunch of slides, sort of a rehearsed lecture.
Right.
Um, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback that people prefer this format.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. We'll give it like 3 more minutes. People still joining.
And Shy, what does this run till 6:30 or so? Is that how you do it
Yeah.
typically?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we do an hour. We're respectful of people's time.
Perfect.
Okay, so will the recording be available? Yes. Just going to answer a couple of quick questions here. That appears to be disabled. Yes, because it's a webinar. platform, then typically it's more of a Q&A and less of a chat. That's limitation of the platform. Whoever asked about the chat. And given the large number of attendees, we got Ellen, Virgil, Vanya. If you can, type questions into the Q&A, that would be really helpful. And then we can, type answers. We can answer, get the clinicians here to answer during the session. That would be very, very helpful. And if anyone, well, we emailed the notification about the YouTube streaming because we're about to run out of capacity on the Zoom. So I'm hoping people got notification they can watch on YouTube as well. And I think we can get started. What do you think, guys? We're ready?
Sure.
All right. So, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you to the almost 1,000 of you who joining us here. Plus, we got a bunch of people watching on YouTube Live. My name is Shai Adelson. I'm one of the founders of Fort Health. We are a mental health practice providing care for children and families in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, coming to more states near you. Now, along with care, we also provide free educational materials for families all over the world. We got families who registered for this all the way from Mumbai to Australia to everywhere. We appreciate you joining us. Each month, what we do is we bring together clinical leaders and researchers to discuss a topic that affects the mental health and well-being of young people. This month topic has touched a nerve because it seems like a lot of people, more than usual, registered has expressed interest. So we've had over 6,300 people registered, and over 2,000 of them say that they work in education. So welcome, educators. Thank you for the work that you do. When looking at national data, the number of students who are chronically absent, which is defined as missing 10% or more of the total number of days enrolled during the school year for any reason, that number has doubled since COVID. Now, some states and locations fare worse than others. For example, according to New York City's Department of Education, 36% of NYC public school students were chronically absent in the 22-23 school year, which is an extremely high number, but it's actually an improvement to the previous year, where that number stood above 40%. Now, chronic absenteeism is a multifaceted issue. There are cultural factors at play. It's very clear that families' relationship with schools has changed during COVID. Anecdotal evidence shows that students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds tend to miss schools more often due to, let's call it logistical reasons or family circumstances, while those of higher socioeconomic backgrounds tend to miss school more often because parents prioritize maybe vacations or trips at the expense of school. So yes, the problem is complex, but at least some of the rise in absenteeism is linked to the increase in the number of students struggling with mental health disorders, especially anxiety and ADHD. And a smaller subset of those have developed such anxiety around school that they simply refuse to go or stay in school. In other words, they suffer from school refusal. Parents and caregivers have a role here as well. We may inadvertently accommodate our child's anxiety and school refusal behaviors, thus increasing the likelihood of their occurrence. So that's some bad news. We're as parents, sometimes we're part of the problem. The good news is that we're also part of the solution. With support, parents and caregivers, with support from school staff, primary care doctors, and of course, mental health professionals can be a key part of the solution and can help their child integrate back into school. This is not a one-way street. To learn about the cultural factors that lead to absenteeism, I would recommend Derek Thompson's excellent podcast, Plain English, from a couple of weeks ago. We actually had our former chief medical officer on Derek's podcast last year. Incredible resource. I recommend, again, it's called Plain English. Our focus today is on the mental health aspects of absenteeism. We're going to discuss what causes chronic absenteeism and how parents can sometimes contribute to it. We're going to talk about when absenteeism turns to school refusal and how to spot the signs of that phenomenon or symptom rather. We're going to talk about the skills and strategies that you as parents can take and educators can help you take to help integrate child back into school. And of course, we'll talk about when to find more help. Again, a nuanced, complicated topic. Luckily, we have with us one of the nation's leading experts on school refusal. Dr. Jeffrey Kasanoff is the founder of Academics West, a school in New York City that serves as a home for students who feel worn down by the many trials and tribulations they have experienced in traditional schools. And with sufficient support supplied by Dr. Kasanoff's team of clinicians and mentors, these students thrive and go on to succeed in academics and beyond. We have learned about Academics West a couple months ago and are just blown away by the work that they do. So thank you, Dr. Kasanoff. We are also joined by my friend, colleague, and partner, Dr. Lindsay Henderson. She is a clinical director at Fort Health. Previously, she managed all of the therapy practice at Amwell, which is the original and still biggest telehealth platform in the world. And before that, she trained and treated hundreds and hundreds of families at McLean Hospital, part of Harvard. So very good to have both of you here. I'm going to just call you Lindsay and Jeffrey, if that's okay, just to keep things a bit more informal. So why don't we jump right in? Jeffrey, can you give us maybe a little more nuance on defining truancy versus chronic absenteeism versus school refusal? What's the data telling us about prevalence of all of these, especially since COVID-19?
Sure. I think there's obviously been a lot of changes since COVID-19. I guess to tease out some of it, so chronic absenteeism, as you described, is really missing 10% or more of school, right? Regardless of the reason, it could be anything. It's not just for some kind of mental health issue. School refusal is really about regular refusing to attend school and or to stay at school. So kids that just want to be called to be picked up in the middle of the day, or kids that really refuse in the morning or the night before and start complaining and saying, I don't want to go to school. The truants are the kids on that it's the Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? It's the kid where the parents don't know where they are, right? But they are truant, they're not attending school, and the parents really don't know where they are. So those are really kind of I think, typical kind of differences between those kind of three important areas. School refusal typically, historically, has been anywhere between 2 to 3% in terms of kind of prevalence estimates of what we see in terms of school-age kids not, refusing to go to school. I think what's interesting to me when you look at all of that stuff is certainly the impact of COVID, and you brought up the tremendous increase in absenteeism kind of during and post-COVID. And I think there's actually very little data actually during the COVID period, like the hot, March of 2020. But 2021, you talked about the rates really spiking for absenteeism. And, when I think about the kids that we service at Academics West, I know the thing that they all want to do. They want to stay home in their beds. It's comfortable. And they want to when they did it virtually, that's like the easiest thing. So I think transitioning, going back to school has been really, really hard for them. And I think those are some of the issues that we're certainly dealing with kind of post-pandemic, how to navigate and getting kids to get back to life as we saw it before. So a lot of issues that I think we're kind of dealing with at this point.
Mm-hmm. Lindsay, can you help us maybe break down some of those issues, like the underlying causes that might lead a student to miss school that frequently?
Sure. So there are a couple of kind of buckets that persist both pre and post COVID. I do think what Jeffrey's talking about is really fascinating. The cultural shift that COVID brought to all of us, where we were able to live 100% of our lives, maybe not at 100% of the quantity and quality, but 100% of our lives at home isolated. And it's a really hard thing to gradually make that shift back to being more fully engaged like we were pre-COVID. And when you think about COVID, it's a little bit like we were running a marathon where they kept moving the finish line. So when you have something that it is abrupt change, You adjust really quickly. It kind of felt like a snow day at the beginning where it was special, it was fun. We were like, just trying to make it through. And then a year and a half later, the snow day is still going, and we just have gained weight, and we've lost we've lost learning, and we've picked up a bunch of really unhealthy habits, both as families, individuals, and society in many ways, and a lot of good things too. So there's this cultural thing that I think I heard in one of these podcasts, this idea of school hygiene, which I really love that idea. It's the real attention and focus and dedication we give to something like sleep. We hear that sleep hygiene quite a bit, these really healthy habits. And we made those, I think, slipped around school over the past several years. We lost our school hygiene, the understanding that school was the most important thing, and that it was a non-negotiable. But, school avoidance, school absenteeism, school refusal is not a new occurrence. And so there are certainly things that predate COVID. Kids who struggle with mental health issues, particularly anxiety and even learning difficulties, can be more prone to sort of struggle with, be susceptible to the things that make going to school, showing up, bringing your best, facing the challenges and the ups and downs of everyday life. They're more susceptible to having difficulty with those things. And then, finally, just quickly, the circumstantial impacts are not insignificant. So there is more illness nowadays, and we have learned to keep our kids home and ourselves home much more strictly when we are sick. Transportation difficulties are persistent, and then home stressors and just straight up socioeconomic stressors that factors that vary so much among us, all underlie a family and a child's missing school.
Okay. I want to stay on the mental health factors that you mentioned. So, what are the disorders? Let's be more specific. What mental health disorders typically lead to absenteeism? Um, let's just break those down.
Sure. Yeah. So all mental health struggles can impact our ability to function in life and to fulfill our daily life expectations and activities. For children, that is school. For adults, that is caretaking, that is work. So all mental illnesses and mental struggles can contribute to difficulty with chronic absenteeism. But what I think of most is the anxiety and related disorders. So much of absenteeism and school avoidance is part of the anxiety avoidance cycle, which I think we'll get into more. But it's a fear, either proportionate or disproportionate to the actual stressor itself, that contributes to a pattern of alleviating the stress and the fear by avoiding the thing that makes you scared. And so for kids who struggle with social anxiety, separation anxiety, panic disorder, school can be particularly risky for problematic patterns to evolve. But definitely kids who struggle with mood disorders, behavioral disorders, when you have things where you're repeatedly not successful at school, why would that be a place you want to go to? Mood disorders, something it's really hard to want to get yourself out of the isolation cycle. And then this is not a mental health disorder, but learning disorders can make school really a scary and discouraging place to be. So those are just a couple examples of how particular disorders may feed into this.
Okay. Jeffrey, I want to go to you for a second. Actually, as mentioned, we're going to make it a bit more organic and chaotic, maybe. A question here from Stephen Gerard. What about kids who go to school but then don't go to class, wander the halls, hide out in library, etc.? What is your best advice when it comes to kids like that? And not saying you got to diagnose, but what could be the possible causes here? They're already at the school, they just don't go into class.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, it's a great question. I think Lindsay brought up a lot of potential issues or causes for that. Could be a learning disability, right? It could be not having completed my homework. It could be, a general anxiety. Could be substance abuse issues. I mean, there's so many underlying possibilities. So it's hard to say on a without knowing more of the details. But these are difficult problems. And I think the best thing to do, obviously, if I was a parent, is to reach out to the school and start to get some data on what's going on, and then begin to start to shake things up, to make some substantive changes in the environment at the school setting, so we can get a better handle on it. But there's the thing that excites me about treating school refusal is it's really complex. And there's a multitude of people that you're involved with. So if you're not a good collaborator, and if the school's not good at collaborating, it's ineffective. So you really have to have the outside provider, the parent, the school community, all engaged in a really systematic approach to treating school avoidance.
Mhm. I want to again get more nuance around some of the symptoms of the disorders Lindsay mentioned and how the way they manifest differs by age. Is there a way that we can segment those?
I've I've dealt with hundreds of kids that have school refusal. I would say that certainly with the younger kids, and even with the older kids, but more with the younger kids, anything that is going to get my parent to let me stay home, I'm going to do it.
Hmm.
Anything. The dog ate my homework. My stomach hurts is always a classic symptom of most kids that have anxiety, especially when they're younger, because they can't express what really they're thinking about. So they're like, my stomach hurts. We don't know what that, you can't really test for that necessarily, right? Or I have a bad headache, is another certain symptom that kids will constantly say to avoid. And it's not bad enough to go to the doctor, but it's bad enough where I can stay home and watch TV and put on Netflix, right? And avoid, right? So, and parents, I think, what is our job? We want to nurture and help our kids. So when the kid is demanding enough, or they become irritating enough, or they keep saying it over and over again, and we have to go to work, or we have to hop on a Zoom call, we get fed up and we say, fine, just stay home and I'll deal with you later on. So I think there is this, my stomach hurts, I have a bad headache. They deflect and they'll say things like, I don't have any tests, today, so I don't have to do anything. The younger kids tend to cry, right? They'll cry more in tantrum, um, and just cause so much noise that it's almost intolerable for the parent. And I think more, typically more so the adolescent will just avoid, be in the darkness, as we kind of maybe all remember a little bit as adolescents, in our rooms with the lights out, and just kind of try to avoid with the pillow over our head, and say, just leave me alone, kind of thing. So, some variations, but I think those are certainly common themes that we see at Academics West, and I'm sure we see, all over the country.
Hmm. Um, Lindsay, again, I'm constantly hunting for nuance today, because it is a nuanced topic. How can we distinguish between chronic absenteeism due to, let's say, mild anxiety or depression, as an example, versus school refusal?
Mhm. It's a good question. And the good news is here that there's nuance, but also I would argue there's commonalities and threads. And so, Jeffrey, you're spot on. And the more I work in this field with my own version of hundreds of kids, teens, families, adults, the more I see the same thing. The anxiety brings physical complaints, whether you know that they're connected or not. The avoidance is there. It just looks different for a 5-year-old versus a 30-year-old. A tantrum can be held by people of all ages. And so I think those are really good themes to look for. And then the nuances, just certainly occur by child as well. Shai, your question about like specific patterns, absenteeism versus school refusal. In my mind, and Jeffrey, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. The distinguishing factor there in my mind is that school refusal may look more like a pattern of avoidance that builds and worsens, and sort of feeds on itself, versus chronic absenteeism, which those was it 18 days, is what we define as chronic absenteeism, so 10% of the school year. Those may be scattered throughout the whole school year. So someone with anxiety, depression, they may have a harder time recovering from life stressors. It may take them longer to bounce back than another kiddo. They may need this quote unquote, and I have mixed feelings about this, but this a mental health day more frequently, that doesn't build upon itself into a cycle that they cannot get out of. So Jeffrey, I don't know if you agree with that, but that feels like a fairly simple high level distinction to me.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. I think certainly school refusal is more consistent, right? It's more problematic. We know that if it lasts for 2 years or more, it's more intractable. So it's very difficult to treat. And because they're kind of stuck in the mud. I think also chronic absenteeism, although it may be kind of haphazard, like it's not like, every single day. But chronic absenteeism, at least from my understanding, doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to go to school.
Mm.
It could be that they just have a medical issue or that their transportation doesn't, their bus doesn't work. All these kind of things that have happened to kids that may really want to go to school, but they just can't get there. Or their parent is, fighting or sick and they feel guilty that they have to stay home, but they want to go to school. I think, when we talk about this mental health issue with school refusal, they don't want to go to school. You know, the truants, they want to lie and they want to vanish and they want to go to a baseball game while their parents don't know. But the school refusal kids, we know where they are, but they just don't want to go and they're digging their heels in and they're saying they'll do anything not to go. And I think,
Mm.
you brought up the anxiety piece, which, we can look at probably so many of these different diagnoses and say, well, the underlying issue is some form of anxiety. Um, Feeling not comfortable to be in the school, right? And one of the, I think, important pieces that you just kind of cue me about is, our goal as educators is to make sure that kids are in an environment where they feel safe, right? It's a least restrictive environment, free, appropriate education, all these terms that we learn as psychologists and educators. Are these kids that are avoiding school? They don't feel that way.
Yeah.
They don't feel comfortable and safe.
There's a point that was made actually by Catherine here on the Q&A, asking if there's any data suggesting that school environments are more toxic and emotionally unsafe following the pandemic. Is that something that you've encountered? Any data or anecdotes on that?
I mean, the only thing, and I don't know what you've seen, Lindsay, but just anecdotally, I mean, I think that actually schools, certainly since all the gun violence, have really added their levels of protection. Certainly at our school, we're a very safe environment, are very careful with who comes in and who goes. Certainly, even where I live, I've seen significant increase in knowing who is in the building and who's not in terms of safety. But I don't know what you've seen, Lindsay. Maybe you have something else.
Well, I agree completely. I wonder, I think safety is defined in the eye of the beholder. So I don't, our attendee and their question how they feel safe may be different than how you and I
Yeah.
define safety. I do think, in addition to what you just said, Jeffrey, I do think that schools in general, at the high level, we have made schools a more emotionally safe and accepting place that COVID has brought into the discussion across all settings, work, school, everywhere. Mental health is a real thing we all struggle with and deserves its own support. So I see a lot of kids being more accepting, non-judgmental, and supportive of themselves and their peers than they were in previous years. But I don't know. That's my understanding of safety. Jeffrey, you shared one of yours. And
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when we finished with lockdowns and people started to, hang around in public spaces, right? There was this whole thing about people forgot how to behave in public. People forgot how to behave in airplanes, right? There might be something there, but no, I don't think that we have the data, at least not people on this call. Um, let's talk about timing. So, are there specific times of the year when signs of school refusal become more evident? And I want to combine that with an audience question from Valerie about, the time we are right now, right? So we're what, 30, 45 days left in the school year, maybe. What to do with what approach can she take and her colleagues take to support students who basically refuse to attend, but now towards the end, they're willing to do so. So let's talk about timing. When do
Yeah.
we usually see these things?
I'll answer that if that's okay, or start at least.
Yeah.
So COVID, was is a classic example. It was like a long-term break, right? So breaks are historically known where school avoidance occurs, right? Because transitions are very hard. And Lindsay brought up kids that may have a learning disability or something else. That just adds to it, right? When you have, oh my God, I have to go back and do all this schoolwork. Even for a typical kid, this transitions after long breaks are very hard. And I think that's kind of in a nutshell why COVID was so challenging for us. It was a long, long break, right? And then you have to go back to, so to speak, real life. So, could be summer vacations, could be if you had a brief illness and you had the flu for 2 weeks and you had to come back. But usually it's after a long break. And we also, at least at our school, we tend to see it a lot. Usually kids start to slide around November, because they've kind of tried in their current school and they seem to just, whether they have some social issues that are occurring or it's just not working out, and they feel that fatigue and they just start to throw their hands up and say, I tried mom and dad for a month or two and I hate it, or whatever the symptomology that they're, kind of spewing at mom and dad to say, I don't want to go anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
To the question, Shai, from the audience, I
Yeah.
think, if this is truly a kid who wants to attend, and a child who struggles with anxiety will often say, okay, tomorrow I just do one more day. Tomorrow I'm ready. I am ready tomorrow. And they are doing their very, very best, right? They are not lying to you. They are doing their very best to get their needs met, and it's our jobs to help them to do so more effectively. But if this child is really ready to come in on day 30 or day 29 left of school, I would say we catch whatever good behavior we can get, and we praise it and we reinforce it and we try to build on it. So one of the struggles that schools face is that it's not a one-to-one ratio. We cannot individualize everybody's learning plan for thousands and thousands of students. It's an enormous amount of pressure on teachers. But I would say, as a rule, we catch them being good, right? We take whatever the good behavior we can, we praise it, we build on it, and we try and reinforce it. That's what I would say, Valerie. That would be my 2 cents.
Wonderful.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I want to touch on two potential factors that might be contributing to the problem, and then we're going to go to solutions. So, Lindsay, let's stay with you. Again, a lot of questions in the chat, I'm not going to start reading them, but a lot of questions in the chat are basically putting the emphasis on parental behavior. Okay, so what role do family dynamics and parenting styles play in exacerbating different forms of absenteeism, including school refusal?
Sure. So there's a couple of logistical factors here. The fact that I work from home along with my husband make this my children getting on the bus just a less high stakes situation by definition, right? It just does, because I'm going to do my job from home. So with more of us working from home, there is less pressure to get your children on the bus because you are going to be able to work from home. So and then that trickles down, I think, to the family's conceptualization and their own cultural sort of school hygiene. So one of the hardest things about being a parent, in my opinion, as a psychologist and a parent, is being consistent and holding consistent expectations and being consistent with your response and your reinforcement of your child's behavior. And so that's going to vary greatly. And a child's behavior going to school, especially anxious or avoidant or just, plain old not so great habits, is going to depend on our ability to be consistent in our own behavior. Of course, a parent's old mental health, illness, wellness, socioeconomic status, and their own access to resources. Like, we get texts. I live in a suburb. We get texts saying the bus driver's sick. They don't have subs. There's no bus today. Like, for some families, that may be it. That may be the deal breaker, and that's why kids are staying home. So those types of family, both the culture of the family and also the very realities for that family and that home dynamic, are some of the things to consider.
Okay. And turning maybe to environmental factors, specifically the school, right? So, Jeffrey, how do environmental factors like maybe bullying or academic pressures or Nico Rodriguez in the chat, talked about technology or social media or gaming. How do all these environmental factors specifically influence absenteeism and school refusal?
Poorly, I think. I think these things are,
In one word.
I mean, that's it. Drop the mic, right? Uh, been shown to be really helpful to kids. It actually can be quite damaging. But when you look at bullying, academic pressures, uh, those are actually things that there's a lot of traction, a lot of things that we can do to fix those things, right? If we know who the bully is, we can, maybe move the student out of that classroom. We can do some protective things, maybe have a peer with them. If it's academic pressure, I always find, when we do that kind of stuff and try to fix that, we modify the academics, right? Maybe we switch, one of the things we've done many times is if the kid doesn't like math in the morning, we move math. We make math in the app, because if math is the sticking point to getting the kid in school, let's flip it, right? And I think some of those things that are very environmentally based, right? They're an antecedent. There's something that's in the environment. We can modify it. Other things like depression, right? If depression is the real causal agent, and the kid has this real long-term depression, that's a lot harder. I can't necessarily change a teacher or remove the bully or raise the curtain on the bully. That takes a lot more intervention to try to make some kind of gain, because the kid that's depressed is thinking about the world in more of a negative way, and that's something that takes a little bit longer, I think, to correct. It's more internalized than external.
Okay. So we're about the halfway mark here. So let's pivot to solutions. Okay, we complain, we analyze the problems. Let's talk about solutions. So
But
Lindsay,
I want to complain more.
no, I think we've done enough of that. We always talk about, we want practical solutions, right? As much as we can. So again, I'm going to go for an audience question here, and Lindsay, go to you. How can we start conversation with family to help support them with school avoidance? Some families think that by keeping their kids home, they're being helpful. So how do we start? Again, we have 30% or more that register educators. How can we start those conversations?
Oh, it's a good question. I think this is always the good rule of thumb, by the way, everyone. Coming from a non-judgmental place is always where to start, right? That as parents, and as educators, I'm sure, as parents, we feel like we are always we're always letting someone down. We're never quite doing enough. It's really hard to be successful in this role. And so to let a parent know, and I'm speaking to all you parents out there as well right now, this is really common. This happens to the best of us. This is not a reflection of you, your child, etc. This is something that is pervasive enough that we could talk about it for hours, right, Jeffrey? And we could invite a million colleagues on to talk about forever. So just being willing and being open to have a conversation, to hear feedback, and to know that you're not alone in this, I think that's always the most important groundwork to lay. The other key, I think, and this isn't a scare tactic, it is just the fact of the avoidance cycle, is that time is of the essence. It's never too late, and it's never too early to address this, right? That the longer that avoidance or a pattern goes on, kind of the harder it can be, it might be to correct. And so time is of the essence, and there is a lot to learn about just the human nature of avoiding the things that are scary and painful and difficult for us, and how we all follow these same very common and well-established patterns of avoiding things that cause pain. And it makes sense. And that removes some of the judgment as a parent, as a student yourself, as a teacher, and makes it a little bit easier to kind of, okay, let's just deal with the facts. So I don't know if that is a helpful starting place, but non-judgmental, learn about the actual underlying patterns that are so well established with decades and decades of science. And then time is of the essence. And that's not a scare tactic, but it is like the longer we don't deal with it, the harder it may be to retract.
Mhm. Lindsay, let's stay with you. Again, solutions now. Routines. I heard from Jeffrey earlier about how breaking a routine, right, is something that contributes. So talk a little bit about how can consistent routines at home and maybe at school can help with reducing school refusal and absenteeism.
Well, Shai, you just gave away the punchline there that consistent routines, both at home and at school, are going to help with behavior overall. So not only are school vacations, whether it's April, spring break or summer break or holiday, winter break, though returning from those things can be really hard, but also returning from legit, illness. So 3 days with the flu can be a really difficult thing to have. I will say, I myself had a stomach bug a few weeks ago. And after legitimately knowing how supportive Shai and the rest of my team members are, and they knew I was sick and everyone wants me to recover, I myself was feeling anxious about the work that wasn't getting done. And so if I'm feeling that as a psychologist with a supportive and enlightened team, imagine how our children might be feeling that. And so getting ahead of it a little bit. So talking to your child, prepping them, like, kind of rehearsing things with them. X, Y, and Z, Mr. Smith knows you're sick. Here is the plan to get your work made up. Here are the steps we're going to take, and adjusting that to the way your child knows best. But thinking ahead a little bit, what are the questions they may be having? How can we break the recovery or the catch up down into very manageable steps? How can we, a couple of days before we return to school, how do we start introducing the same wake up time, the same bedtime routine? You start getting your house on school routine rather than summer break routine in the days and weeks leading back up to returning to school. So Jeffrey, I'd love to hear you are in the schools. I'd love to hear anything else.
I think that everything that you said was really on point. I think that from when I treat with school refusal, and you're right, it's incredibly hard, first of all. And I think parents that have kids that are struggling, my heart goes out to you guys. It's not easy, and because you're really kind of trying to take a child or a ship and move it in a totally different direction, and when the winds are blowing in the wrong way, it's a storm, and there's stormy seas ahead. And I think what we want to teach parents, hey, you can't do this alone. It is very hard, and you do need other support, whether it's other parents, other professionals, like the good work that you guys do and what we do at our school, because it's hard. And if you don't know what you're doing and haven't seen it before, because you have to do it consistently. And I think your point about consistency is what makes it so challenging, because as parents, we have work, we have this, we have where you're not getting along with our partner, whatever it is, and yet we're trying to tell the kid, when you get off the bus, you do your homework. When you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you put your clothes on, and your Chromebook better be charged from the night before, right? All these things that kids do to mess stuff up, right? Because they don't want to go, right? So I think we need to create those consistent patterns and routines in a very systematic way, so kids know, even though in their head they're like, I kind of don't want to go to school, I don't want to go to school, but mom or dad say, hey, come on, the bus is here, let's go. The bus is here, let's get ready to the front door, let's wait outside. Well, once they're outside waiting for the bus, they may have this negative thought pattern, but darn it, they're already here, so they got to get into the bus, and they have a negative pattern of thinking, but they're already doing the behavioral pattern of going to school. And I think we all know this as people text messaging and all this stuff, because I speak to my kids all the time, and it's almost silly, because I also probably enable, right? When in 1942, when I was in college, no one spoke to me. I had to get on the bus. I was a latchkey kid, and I had to get the key from behind my house and feed the dog and all those kind of things. And I did it. And I learned that resiliency. And I think one of the things that the pandemic did is it stopped us from teaching to be a little bit more resilient and have to fight through some of the challenges that life
Mm.
brings us. And that I think is such a powerful piece in all of mental health, and especially with school refusal, is teaching kids the stress tolerance. You know, my dad always said to me, you don't always get what you want. But I
Yeah.
want I want the ice cream right now.
Yes.
I don't want to go to school. Well, you don't always get what you want, kid. That's life, right? And I think we need to start to teach kids a little bit more of that resiliency and how to manage their own distress tolerance.
Well, so I recommend a podcast. Now I recommend a book. The latest book from Jonathan Haidt about the rewiring of the teenage brain. Um, Excellent book that talks a lot about how, as parents, we become overprotective, we pad everything, and yet online we let kids do whatever the hell they want. So somewhat linked to this conversation. So we talked a lot about consistency, but Jeffrey, let's stay with you for a sec, and then Lindsay, I think you're going to have builds on this. How do you balance being consistent but also being flexible at the same time?
Well, I don't know if I would say, listen, you always have to pivot a little bit with kids.
Hmm.
But I would say it's unconditional, positive regard, and it's love and kindness while being consistent. I think that's really important. We try to work with our parents and our families. We're not going to yell. We're consistent with our words, and we do what we call like a broken record technique, right? We're very assertive in our command language, um, but we're going to do it with kindness. As the kid might be screaming, and I'm sure Lindsay sometimes has her kids and they're annoyed and irritated, and she's like, as I told you, you got to put on your pajamas and you got to get ready for bed, but I don't want to. I love you, but you got, again, broken record. You got to put your pajamas on and get ready for bed. And you keep saying it because, you don't want to create this imbalance where the kids are ruling the roost, right? It's got to be the other way where the parent or the school are are authoritative, right? Not authoritarian where they're being like, I said so because I said so, but telling you the why behind it. And then I get, Shy, I think in contrast, there are times where we do need to be, somewhat flexible when, certain events happen that are, I would say, at a higher level, right? Obviously, if there's a death in the family, if there's some other kind of event that's where the kid's like, I just need a break because, and I think you just cued me on something, when we treat school refusal, kids sometimes need to say, I've been working so hard going to school for a week. I need a day off. I need to recoil, have a break, watch something, and then I will go back. And we do that, by the way,
Mm.
with treating OCD and all sorts of things. It's this approach, it's approach, 2 steps forward. And let me take a little step back for it. Let me take a little break. But then we go back to that situation because it's hard for kids, right? It's a lot of distress. So we want to give them, I would say, a little wiggle room once in a while, right? Like a little pass. But if we do it too much, then we go back, to where we started from. So I think it's a little bit of there's an art to it in terms of how you do that.
Hmm.
And complicating it further is that every child is different, right? And so a kid who can, whether it's your own child or in your classroom, you get to know which of the kids can handle a little bit of flexibility or deviation from the routine, and for whom is that too challenging to really consider it as an option, right? That we make other concessions to sort of meet them where they're at and be flexible with them. But there are certainly children and adults who that deviation. Shy is now a dear friend, and I know how routine he is and how his so much of his success is from being very consistent. And so even as adults, some of us can be flexible and some of us are less adaptable at inconsistency. And Shy, by the way, I call that out with great love, just to illustrate that it's not just kids, it's adults too.
Right.
Yeah. The only other thing I would add here, which I think I should have included earlier, which is an important point, is when there are going to be times when as parents we're not successful and we can't get our kids into school for the day. then you still have options. You still have some control and power to make a difference, and that is to not make the staying home fun. Don't reinforce it. Don't make it a pleasant experience. So, if you can't win at getting your kid on the bus or in the school, or for schools, if they're avoidant, don't reinforce it. Make it a neutral experience, if not an unpleasant one, just a neutral one. So what is their favorite thing? Watching YouTube. That's not what they're doing if they've refused to go to school that day. When going to a school nurse, what's reinforcing or pleasurable there? We limit that, and we really only use those things for when it is when they are needing our legitimate sort of support and recovery.
I can anecdotally attest that this strategy works and has saved at least 4 days this year with my little one who's 11. Oh, you want to stay, don't feel well? That's fine. There'll be no screens though. You're going to leave the phone, the laptop with me in this office and go play with the dog all day, or better yet, take him for a walk. It's like, okay, fine, I'll go to school.
Yeah.
Um,
Look, I think
let's pivot here again. Lots of people here are school staff. Jeff, you are sort of one foot in mental health, one foot in school. So I think you're best positioned here. What can school staff do when a student starts to miss school so often? Is there a playbook? Is there a series of steps here?
uh, I think there is certainly. I think the important piece with school is you have to be good collaborators with the family and the community. This whole thing doesn't work out unless you're not, you have to be good at communicating with others and being on the same team. But the first step is obviously like anything, you want to collect data, right? What is the free, how often is the kid absent? Who is the kid, hanging out with? Are they going to school or are they roaming the halls like that, first question that was asked in the beginning? What is the, student doing while they're there? Are they hiding out in the bathroom? What's going on? So we can get data before, and that way we can inform the parents, evaluate kind of what might be the causes. Is there some underlying anxiety that the parent never disclosed? Because oftentimes parents are at odds with the school, and this is something that we may not always share, enough, but, and, when I, had a large private practice, parents are like not always so trusting of the school. And the truth is, and I say this to all parents listening, teachers and staff in schools only want to do one thing, and that's to help your kid. And that's been like and I can't say that about every single one, but historically, what I've seen is people go into professions for a certain reason, right? I went and became a psychologist because I like helping people. I'm sure Lindsay did the same thing. So I'm not in it to go, be harmful or do something else. And I think that the educators are there to figure out what's the puzzle, because they want a kid who's going to do well, get A's in school, have lots of friends, be kind, engage in the community because it's more fun for them as well. I think so, all this kind of reinforcing stuff. But I think the important piece is they got to collect the data and then inform everybody so they can figure out how we can start to help, the child, so they can come.
Yeah. Let's continue actually on that theme. A question here from Monica Ransone. Thank you for the question, Monica. So, Jeff, talk a little bit about what integration strategies exist, and then what are ones that are better for younger kids versus older kids?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, younger kids, just like you brought up, I think actually younger kids to some degree are a little bit easier, because if you stay kind of very clear and you say, if, as you said, if you're staying home, there's no TV and it's just sitting at the table, maybe you can pet the dog, but like you're not watching TV, and all of a sudden the kid has a tantrum, and then 20 minutes later the kid's like, okay, I'll go to school. It's like magic, right? It really is very powerful when you see that, and I've seen it myself, and I know that you have with the nodding. The lower school kids, the younger ones, really a lot of, I would say, more reinforcers, right? Very simple reinforcers to get the student to reintegrate a little bit better. So doing things like, when you come to school, you're going to come and hang out in a maybe it's the psychologist or social worker's office, or a teacher that the kid really likes who's a reinforcing agent, right? So we don't really talk about that term a lot, but some teachers are they like this, they have superpowers. They're just loved by the kid, right? And that's a really powerful thing that we utilize, certainly, and I hope all schools utilize. Find out who that person is, and that person is the one that meets them at the door, right?
Mhm.
Come to my office and just hang out for a little bit. Let's play some games, right? They don't.
I need your help with something. Can you help me? Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
right. And then also maybe we make them the line leader, right? So if it's a lower school, we give them power and the perception that they're in control of their environment, right? Really, really important. And, think about it. Kids before they have, they're 12, 13, 14, they're kind of like just following like life. They don't have what we call metacognition. They're not like really self-aware yet of what's going on. So they're kind of like, oh, that's cool. Oh, I get a lollipop. Like it's a lot more powerful than we realize to make it easy like that, and to just slowly do it over time and get a younger kid into the school setting. I think older kids are a lot more challenging. And I think because they're the size of us, they can use their words. So, using a scripted behavior plan or some kind of reinforcement plan is less effective, and we tend to use more contracts. So we get the adolescent to have buy-in. So whether the reintegration is, okay, you're going to slowly titrate into the school setting, it's also, how are you going to do that? And the student, do you agree with it? Are you cool with it? Right? We want, and here's the expectations, and they need to have, be a part in that kind of social contract to making this, systemic change. Otherwise, they get mad. They don't want to do it. So, adolescents want more, control in their decision making, but they agree to what's going to happen if they don't. So they understand what's coming.
What was the term you used with the teacher that acts as was it
Oh,
positive?
reinforcing agent.
Reinforcing agent. I love that. Lindsay, what
I
about
didn't,
peers?
I didn't make it up.
Oh, I know, I know.
I stole it from
What
someone
ab-
else, but that's fine.
what about the child's peers? Can they be reinforcing agent? How can we best leverage them to positive effect?
Yeah, I think this is a neat idea to walk a middle ground in, because number one, a peer should never feel responsible for one of their other peers, or like they have to take care of have to take care of anyone, right? So that's the thing to avoid. But having a buddy, like a safety person, somebody who is an ally, maybe more importantly, can be incredibly powerful. So if that is, nowadays, at least here, our kids have assigned seats on the bus. So if you get to sit with your buddy on the bus instead of, I mean, that's a super easy thing to change, right? Or if you know that you're going to see your buddy when you walk in the door, or you sit next to them at school, or and so that could be a very easy change without it being something like, I need you to help take care of your friend for me. Like, it can be something that is just harnessing the power of friendship, without it being too much of a caretaker responsibility, which I think is a risk that all of our children are up against within their peer relationships, is feeling a pressure to be something more than they should in the health and well-being of their peers. And then I think just in general, we are doing a good job as a society in making feelings and emotions something that are safe to talk about and generally more accepted. And that should be by all peers, frankly.
Mhm. I want to go to more help and professional solutions. So, Jeffrey, tell us a little bit about the model that you guys have at Academics West and how you support students.
How much time do we have left? It takes a
You
long
can do
time.
it in 90 seconds. But essentially, I'm looking for strategies and tools that are applicable so that someone at a New York City public school can say, "Oh, I picked that up. Here's a resource I can then go and use."
Right, right. Okay. So I'll give you a soundbite.
Yeah.
But I think Lindsay brought up really the classic point that we utilize all the time. You want to make school reinforcing and home less reinforcing, right? And that's the whole kind of game here, right? It is environmental shifting, right? It's pivoting. Make school more enjoyable and reinforcing, whether it's through pro-social, interactions with peers and peers that don't feel overburdened, as Lindsay brought up. You don't want them to feel like they have to hold the weight of the world of the student. But hey buddy, how you doing? I'll sit with you at lunch. Those things make a difference, right? Even so and home has to be what I like to call boring, and that's really like the essential kind of pieces. And then we also increase exposure. So when kids start in our school, we don't just say, okay, we throw them in and they're in full day, because we know when kids come to Academics West, they've already had some struggles. So we slowly titrate them into the classroom setting. And that's whether that's in the lower school or middle or upper school. We slowly titrate them in. And again, it's exposure, right? It's exposing them, getting them a little comfortable, feeling okay, everything's okay. I can handle it. School's not overwhelming. For most kids, we don't make homework, so overwhelming initially, right? Some kids eventually we do ratchet it up, obviously, but that also is overwhelming. The goal is to get them to acclimate, right? Just like, it's a terrible example, but I'll give it anyway. It's like when you buy fish and you put them in the fish tank, right? You got to let them sit in there for a couple of hours, right? Before you pour them in, right? There's a similar thing to that, right? You want the water to be the same temperature and for the fish to feel comfortable. We do a similar thing, and we want kids to feel comfortable, safe, so they can, really be successful.
Right. Let's assume that, things are not getting better here. Lindsay, when should parents consider looking for more help?
Yeah.
What that helps look like? And essentially, talk about the work that you do.
Yeah. Everyone should consider getting more help when the thing that you're experiencing is impacting the functioning of yourself, your child, or your family as a whole. So when school avoidance is such that the emotion around it, the struggle around it, the impact on the family or grades or mental health is noticeable, that's when to seek help from a professional like those of us on this call. And there are a couple ways to go about it. There's certainly a value of getting sort of a professional, mental health professional's opinion on what type of underlying anxiety or mental health disorder or learning struggle might be going on underneath. Like, is there something underlying all of this that can and should be treated? But then also very empowering, like the key here is how do we empower our children to feel successful and our parents and educators to also feel successful. So getting treatment with a therapist, a psychologist, like Jeffrey, myself, or my team at Fort Health, we're not only treating the child, but we're treating the parent and caregiver to learn the skills that really do shift behavior from being uncomfortable, painful, unsuccessful to being way more healthy, something to celebrate, something to feel proud of. So looking for professionals who can teach not only a child or a teenager, but also parent caregivers, very implemented, like actionable skills is something to definitely consider sooner rather than later.
Wonderful. Jeffrey, where can people learn more about Academics West and Therapy West?
So they can go to our website, which is obviously www.academicswest.com or www.therapywest.com. So Academics West is obviously it's our high support college preparatory program. We're located in the heart of Manhattan, right by Lincoln Center. We're a small setting to obviously help and support kids and parents, right? So kids can go on to college. And Therapy West is a mental health practice that treats and primarily does evidence-based intervention to treat, for kids, adolescents, and to help parents. And just one thing, if I could just highlight that I think that Lindsay said is, we live in a society where parents, we're so individualized, right? Other countries, it's a community, right, that kind of raises a child. And I think, unfortunately, the United States has kind of pivoted to this where kind of everybody does it themselves a little bit. I just took an Uber, and a gentleman that was from another country, he's like, "Oh yeah, I leave my kids, out, and everybody takes care of them in his community back home." And that's powerful. And I think it's so important to seek the right mental health support in the school and to collaborate together to help, the child because they're hurting, and the best way is that we all have to do it together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're at the end of our time here. So I want to thank our speakers and guests here. I want to thank anybody who joined us. I want to thank the 237 people who have asked questions. And yeah, so incredibly important topic. A recording will be available tomorrow on forthealth.com/resources. And if you need support for your students, for your patients, for your community, visit forthealth.com. We can also, for doctors and counselors, we can also mail these sheets over and you can give them to students or whatnot. So again, forthealth.com or email us, get in touch. We're here to help and join us next month. Next month in May, we are partnering with Tourette Association of America to talk about promoting self-advocacy, which is relevant for children with Tourette's, but really relevant for all children. So thank you very much again. Thank you, Jeffrey. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a lovely evening. Bye.